Hello there, and welcome to Sync Music Matters, a podcast that explores the beautiful relationship between music and the moving image. My name is Jim Hustvedt, and I'm your host on this journey, as each week I seek to understand the people and the process behind the best music in TV, film and games. I'm talking to composers, but I'm also talking to editors, music supervisors, directors, and anyone else who's involved with the synchronous process of pairing audio and visuals. Hello listener, welcome back to another episode of Sync Music Matters. Today I'm chatting with composer Oli Julian, whose latest project is Netflix's adaptation of The Twits. It's a brilliantly unhinged take on Roald Dahl's classic novel. The score is as mischievous as the characters themselves. Oli describes the music as kleptomaniacal, and it's packed with things like Bulgarian choirs, flatulent baltic brass, and all sorts of gloriously odd sounds. Oli talks about how he ended up playing the musical Saw over Zoom to Netflix execs, which he reckons might have been the moment he actually landed the gig. We talk about his path into music and how a recording of Wonderwall on a 4-track recorder set him on the path to composing. Having said that, when we talked about the Blur versus Oasis war of the 90s, it sounds like Oli was very much in the Blur camp. I myself at that point was very much in my metal phase, listening to Metallica and Rage Against the Machine, so I don't have a camp per se, but I think if I had to pick one, it would probably be Oasis. Sorry, Damon Albarn, please don't cancel me. As well as The Twits, we also talk Renegade Nell, which Oli co-composed with Nick Foster. We talk about chocolate biscuits, pickleball, Oli's brief dalliance as an ice cream man in Germany, and his early career ambition of parking shopping trolleys in the local supermarket. If you are a regular listener to the show and you have 11 and a half seconds to spare, I would be hugely grateful if you could just rate and review the show on your preferred podcast platform. It just goes a long way to helping the show reach as many people as possible, and for that I would be very, very grateful. I will also just mention that you can follow the show on Instagram if you'd like. Search for LARP_music or just search Jim Hustvedt. Anyway, that's enough of that. Grab yourself a cup of tea and a chocolate digestive. Let's chat to Oli. Oli Julian is an RTS award-winning and Ivor-nominated composer, producer and arranger of music for TV and film. Series credits include Sex Education for Netflix, Renegade Nell and The Full Monty for Disney+, and TV series credits include Catastrophe for Channel 4 and Motherland for the BBC, for which Oli won the RTS Best Music Award. And Oli has recently completed the score for Netflix's Roald Dahl classic, The Twits. Oli, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So I will start, as ever, in the same place, which is if we were to cast our mind back to a young Oli growing up on the mean streets of Macclesfield, if someone had asked you, what would you like to be when you grow up, what would you have replied?
Well, the first thing I wanted to be was someone who tidied up the trolleys in the supermarket, because that seemed like the most fun job ever, and why would you want to do anything else?
It's good to have a dream.
Yeah. But then I after that, I think I wanted to be Prime Minister for a bit, and then shortly after that, I decided that music was kind of my jam. I had no idea when I was growing up that you could write music for TV or it was a job of any kind. It wasn't until I'd actually finished my masters that I'd realised how to get into it, as it were. But at school, I was in a lot of bands. I played the trumpet and played the drums in the jazz bands and orchestras and things.
Which was your first instrument?
The trumpet was my very first instrument. But then
how old were you?
About 7 or 8, I think. And then I soon ditched that when I saw the drums, because I thought that that's a lot cooler. And the great thing about the drums was you could be in all of the bands, and there wasn't any other drummers at the school at the time, so I kind of got first dibs in all of the orchestras and things. I got into jazz bands and orchestras and brass bands, growing up in the north. And then alongside that, when I was a teenager, I got into recording and 4 tracks. And I got my first 4-track when I was like 14 or something, and me and my friends would get very excited about overdubbing vocals and recording our songs. And so that's when the production music tech kind of side of my brain kicked in.
Can you remember the first track that you recorded on the 4-track?
I think it was probably me just doing Wonderwall. I think.
So you played guitar by that point?
So yeah, I sort of self-taught myself guitar in order to get all my angsty teenage thoughts out. So yeah, I kind of self-taught myself the guitar and piano at the same time as learning the drums. So I kind of had a jack of all trades, definitely master of none approach to musicianship when I was growing up at school. And then I went to study German, did languages at university, but then again finished that and decided that wasn't really what I wanted to do long term. I definitely had this desire to write music and somehow make a living out of it, whether it was pop music or something else. And so I went and did a master's at Westminster in music production. And after I'd finished that, I started working at a post house in Soho. And then from that, I went to a kind of music production, music writing company called Soundtree, where I worked for 7 or 8 years as an in-house writer, doing a lot of adverts and that kind of thing. And then I got my first TV gig, which was a sitcom called Spy for Sky One, with a director called Ben Taylor, who had just come out of doing a lot of music video direction, and this was his first scripted TV gig. And we got on really well, and we've just worked together on most things ever since. And most of the biggest hits I've done with him have been with him. For example, Catastrophe and Sex Education. So,
how did he first hear about you?
Well, funnily enough, it was the manager of my old company was on the train with his producer, and his producer was saying, "Oh, we're going to need a composer," and so they came to the Soundtree saying, "Let's pitch some ideas for a track." That's how it all began.
Okay, so you pitched some ideas for the soundtrack, and then they decided that you were the guy.
Yeah,
nice,
which was great. And yeah, then we went on to do. And then, shortly after that, I went, freelance from that company, and I started getting more and more sitcom gigs. The TV comedy world is very small, really, and everyone knows everyone. And you work with an editor or director or producer, and then, 6 months later, they're on another show, and you can kind of exponentially grow your network of contacts quite quickly, especially in TV comedy. And so I ended up doing a lot of kind of half-hour sitcoms in a short period of time, which was great. It was a lot of fun. And, comedy was something that I'd grown up with loving. And I was scoring shows that had a lot of my favourite stars in, and comedians and writers. And so I was very, very happy to be working in that sphere.
Amazing. That first program, Spy, was it?
Spy, yeah.
Spy. What can you remember what you pitched? What was the feel? What was the vibe of the music that you pitched?
It was quite a jazzy, a sort of produced, not electro swing, but a fairly jazzy piece. They had the title sequence for the show, because it was kind of a kids show, but adults would enjoy as well, and it had a kind of soul bass kind of title sequence vibe, and I think it worked very well with that stylistically. It was fun It was slightly mysterious, and it invited you in to quite on a riotous journey. It was a great show.
It sounds like that was, if you were to sort of look for a milestone that sort of kick-started things for you, it sounds like that might be it, is it?
Absolutely, definitely, yeah.
And just, is it interesting as well, the journey? When you said you were a runner at a post house in Soho, was that doing music or just...
No, making tea.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wasn't there for very long, but I came out of Westminster not really knowing how to get into this business, and I started in a sound studio, even though I wanted to do music. Started in a sound studio making tea and toast for people coming in doing voiceovers, and I remember the manager of the studio said to me in my interview, he said, we don't do music here, right? You're not going to leave after like 2 months. And I was like, absolutely not. No, this is great. And then I left after like 2 months.
2 months later.
So, he just like rolled his eyes when I said I was leaving, which is fair enough.
Well, I mean, I suppose you came away with some valuable life skills. Making amazing tea and toast is very important.
For Simon Pegg and Stephen Fry, that's great.
And did the connection with the music production studio that you moved to, did that come through the post house or not?
It did, yeah. It was I think Pete Rayburn, who runs Soundtree, had somehow knew the receptionist at the post house, so she told me that there was potentially a position at this music production company. So I followed it up like a hawk and just
Nice. And it sounds like when you started out in your early days, it was much more kind of a performance-based relationship with music that evolved into music tech thanks to the 4-track. It's funny because that was my first dalliance with music production as well, was borrowing a friend's 4-track. I was just like, whoa, this is incredible. I can do harmonies. Do you still harbour ambition of playing live, or do you play live anymore or not?
I do have ambitions of playing live. I haven't done it for so long that it's slightly daunting. That being said, up in Sheffield here, I'm part of a collective and minimalist improvised folk collective, and we do a lot of gigs around Sheffield where we essentially turn up and improvise kind of Steve Reichian music. So I'm that's my outlet at the moment for performance. And if there was an opportunity to perform something that I had written live and it made sense, I'd snap it up, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the likes of Hans Zimmer and Ramin Djawadi taking their scores on the road, you could sort of do a whole back catalogue of the Twits, Sex Education.
Absolutely.
And going back as well to your jazz roots and that first demo that you did for Spy, I feel like stylistically there's a quite a sort of sense of fun and a quirky nature to a lot of your scores. Do you think would that be fair to say? Is that what you do?
Yes, I think that is fair. I probably dictated a little bit by the fact that I've done so much comedy, and I was always, for every comedy that I was doing, I was trying to find the unique sound for that show, the signature that would make it different from other shows. So, for example, in Catastrophe, it's the yodel, or in Plebs, it's the fact that we did a sort of Jamaican ska soundtrack. And Motherland, like the brass kind of New Orleans kind of brass thing. So it's giving every show a distinct sonic signature. But I tend to write quite hooky, catchy music, I think, and it's I guess doing that with a unique, interesting signature. And yeah, lightness is in there. I think I probably write, fun, quirky music, but in a lot of comedy, especially these days, you get a lot of dark moments as well, and so you end up going into more dramatic territory. And especially in the Twits, there's some dark and emotional moments.
Under the skin. So let's talk about the Twits. Before we get into it, what would you say is the sonic signature of the Twits?
I'd say it was, I've invented this word, kleptomaniacal.
Kleptomaniacal.
like when you watch the movie, you'll see the Twits themselves. They're like magpies. They borrow bits of everything in their crazy wacky house. And for the Twits themselves, for the film themselves, for the score itself, like I've also done that. I've tried to take bits and bobs from everywhere, weird sounds, eccentric sounds, and combine it to make something kind of unique. All the characters are very eccentric and weird, and so it kind of demanded a lot of weird instrumentation in my head.
What are some of those weird instruments? Because I've managed to get a link to listen to the tracks. So there's loads of lovely, there's sort of slightly detuned mandolins, and I think it was mandolin. And talk us through some of those interesting instruments that you've kleptomaniacally taken.
So for example, the Twits themselves, Mr. Twit is voiced by Johnny Vegas, who has quite a high voice but is very small, and then Mrs. Twit is voiced by Margo Martindale, who has a deeper voice and she's very tall. And then conversely, Mr. Twit has kind of a Balkan brass theme, which is quite flatulent in its sound. And Mrs. Twit, the backstory of Mrs. Twit is that she harboured ambitions of being an opera singer when she was younger. So she has this kind of slightly off-key operatic voice, and so you've got like the two ends of the sonic spectrum that work quite well, sort of complementing each other. I mean, more broadly, the idea behind the sonic palette was that it was ugly and beautiful in places. Like it was, it shouldn't be squeaky clean by any means, because these are kind of grotesque characters, but the story itself is one of empathy and, not letting hatred win. And so there are definitely moments of purity and sweetness in there. But for our mean characters, as it were, there's definitely some shonky sounds. And then like that kind of Balkan brass, and then we've got a lot of jaw harp in there, because there's these there are these characters called the Florgnorbles, which come out of the Mugglewumps, which are like stress balls, which are tiny little furry balls that bounce around and are helpful. And so I used a jaw harp for those characters, which was quite fun, and then a kind of keening musical saw for the Mugglewumps, who represent empathy in the story and lightness, and are kind of parental figures almost to our main characters, which are the children. And so that has a purity and an emotion which is absent from the Twits.
From the Twits, yeah. So take us back to the beginning of how this project came about. Did you pitch for this one?
I did, yes.
Yeah. Just talk us through that process, the brief coming in, what the thought process, and how you approached the pitch.
It was a long time ago. It was 2020.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was 2020 when I first got the script, and back then it was going to be a TV series originally, and David Byrne was already on board to do the songs, and I pitched a bunch of ideas, not having heard David's songs actually, but it turned out that they were kind of in the same instrumentational world, which was helpful. I pitched a bunch of ideas. The director, Phil Johnson, had known my work from Sex Education and Catastrophe and liked that kind of irreverent approach that was in Catastrophe. And so I pitched that to him and the whole Netflix team. And then I had a funny Zoom call with them all where I was in my attic playing all of these instruments that I had just lying around, and I got the musical saw out and started playing it on the call. and after the fact, they said that was the moment I got the job, when I started playing the saw on the Zoom, not really knowing how to play the saw very well. So I got the gig, but then I can't remember the timeline exactly, because I can't remember whether it was the strikes or COVID or whatever, but over a period of time, the show then got changed to a film, and so they had to do a lot of rewriting. So I was kind of stood down for a year or two, and then I only really got cracking again in properly scoring it in about 2023. And with animation, this is my first feature-length animation, and it's definitely a different process to doing live action. The timeline's crazily different, and you're jumping in at key points and then stepping away, and it takes a long time to do a feature animation.
Did you write were you writing cues behind the scenes before you'd seen scenes, or were you waiting until you had specific scenes to write for?
I was waiting till I had scenes, but those scenes might have been very basic animatic without just a sketch drawing. And I had been writing themes before then that I knew would go somewhere, but wasn't quite sure where yet. But it kind of all comes together quite quickly late on, when you start seeing the previs animated properly, and you're like, oh, now I understand what that character's doing there. I didn't really know what was happening there before. And so it's definitely a different process, and you don't have the same ability like when you do with live action to throw things quickly at the picture to see how they feel against the visuals that you're faced with, because you're just faced with line drawings, and everything looks like anything on against line drawings. It could be anything, so you really have to use your imagination and look at the artwork that's been given, the characters, and imagine where it's going to be, what it's going to be like, so you can develop the score in time.
Yeah. And so you get the animatic, you kind of reading between the lines and coming up with things that work, and then further down you get, what do you call it, the previs?
Yeah.
Is that, presumably that's a sort of rough animatic, is it?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Okay. Is that the point where you start fleshing out those ideas and sort of putting them to picture to see whether or not they work? Yeah,
once that's locked, essentially they lock what you'd call a picture lock in live action. Things may change, but that's broadly the shape of the story, and it's in a linear fashion, and you can start working to cues essentially, and spotting. That's when we started spotting.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Right. So it's further down that process.
Yeah.
And with the sort of ideas that you would have come up with at the sort of line drawing stage, were there any that you can remember that when you finally got to the sort of the previs, you sort of thought, okay, no, that's not working at all? Or did you manage to get it fairly well matched up?
It was fairly well matched up. I think we once the animation started coming together, you need a lot less because there's so much visually to digest. Like with I think working on any show, I always end up starting out with more than I need in terms of the palette, and then taking things out and going, do I actually need that now? Does what is important in the sound here? What's needed? So yeah, that process definitely happened.
Yeah. And it sounds like, because obviously you play a number of different instruments, are your initial sketches all you playing in the instruments? And at what point do you start to bring in other musicians?
Well, yes, usually I play the instruments at the initial demo stage. As I said, I play a lot of things badly. And so I like to work with, great musicians to re-record things once I've sketched out the writing. And for this project, I actually used a lot of musicians up here in Sheffield who were local. And then we did a lot of recording down in London at Air Studios, all of the orchestral stuff, which was the last piece of the puzzle to go in. A lot of the smaller solo instrumentation I'd done like months before up here.
And you mentioned before as well, so obviously David Byrne has been involved with a lot of the songwriting. Can you tell us a bit about the process of working with David in terms of, because there's quite song heavy, isn't it? The score. When I was listening to it, I think at least the first 5 or 6 tracks have vocals on. What was that process like? Well,
because it's animation, and they were animating to his tracks. His work was done a lot earlier than mine, but we did cross over a bit in talking about instrumentation and palette in general, and then I also did an arrangement of a brass and string arrangement on one of his songs once we'd got to the recording stage at Air to add some lush orchestration to the lullaby song that he's written. So yeah, his involvement was kind of much before mine, and then we kind of came together at the end. And as I said, luckily that our musical worlds were quite similar. So
yeah, I was going to say, because I didn't realise that they'd been done so much earlier and almost a slightly sort of separate process. The continuity, I didn't spot anything as well. So I think
good.
It definitely
That's good. That's good.
I just assumed that you'd been involved with the production of those tracks.
No, those were kind of almost fully formed by the time I came on board, really. But I hadn't heard them when I did my pitch. But once I did hear them, I was like, oh yeah, I can lean into that a bit more, or he can, we can kind of join forces a little bit.
Absolutely. Awesome. And I just wanted to sort of touch briefly on as well, your winning of an RTS award, because I always wonder with these things, how does the winning of an award, because it was for Motherland, wasn't it, the BBC series Motherland that you won the award, does that change things? Does that put you on a map in a different regard? Did you sort of wake up the following morning and sort of just missed calls a go?
No, not really. No, I mean, it was lovely, and it was great that a comedy won, because usually comedies don't win those awards. They go to big dramas, serious TV, and so yeah, I was very pleased, and I'm very proud of that music. I think it supports the show very well. I think it definitely made people slightly more aware of me. I think Motherland was a hit show anyway. A lot of people who, when I mention the projects that I've worked on, that's one of the ones, especially in the UK, that people remember, that and Sex Education. But no, I was nominated for an RTS for Renegade Nell with Nick Foster, which I'm also very proud of. It's a piece of music. Unfortunately, that show got cancelled after one season, which is a shame because it was really good. But yeah, no, it's not. I don't think the phone was ringing off the hook necessarily.
Yeah. Well, I always sort of wonder with those things. But I suppose it reinforces your credibility, and as you say, it's nice to get the recognition. And why is it that you think that it's usually the dramas that the serious TV that wins the award? Why not more comedy?
I think there's a correlation across all categories in these awards. Often, not always, obviously, but a general, very vague correlation between what people have voted for in the jury process and, what they wanted to watch, what they've enjoyed. And often, there's just more chance of the music for an hour-long high-profile drama to get the exposure, I think, to win these awards. And I think that's also, totally justified. And I think often it's just, I think the comedy doesn't always get its fair slice of the limelight, as it were, when it comes to recognition, because it's almost like the poor cousin of drama sometimes, sitcoms anyway. And the budgets are often tiny compared to drama budgets, and that means you can't do as much, in recording wise or whatever. So it's not quite the same level playing field.
No. Well, I was wondering as well, when you were saying that, obviously as human beings we have a tendency to move towards the negative rather than towards the positive. So you can get 99 compliments, and if you get one bit of criticism, you'll tend to fixate on the criticism. And we see it in the news. If it bleeds, it leads. We want to hear about all the negative stuff. And I just wonder whether in drama, because it's enlisting, for want of a better term, negative emotion, whether that draws the attention more as well. I don't know.
Well, maybe. I also think, depending on the drama, I think music for comedy often is doing a big technical job. It can have a sonic stamp and be a signature, saying, look at this show, isn't it quirky, isn't it new, isn't it fun? But it's often there in a technical capacity to set up jokes, to make the jokes funnier than they actually are, or to drive the narrative along quickly. Especially in a half-hour comedy, you've got to get from top to bottom and what have you. Whereas in drama, certain kinds of drama, you might, as a composer, be afforded more space to experiment or be a bit more free with a mood or a tone, which means that you have to do less heavy lifting, technical heavy lifting, and more emotional support or tonal support. I don't know whether this is just me thinking out loud, but it feels like if you have that space to do that, you can often create something that is maybe more memorable or more developed as an idea. If you're doing an hour show, all the cues are generally going to be longer as well.
Sure. Yeah. Interesting. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on briefly as well was Renegade Nell. You mentioned working with Nick Foster. How did that pairing come about?
Well, I've known Nick for years. We both were working with Soundtree, the company I mentioned at the beginning, a long time ago, and we've known each other since then, and have worked together off and on various projects. He's a great composer, but he's also a better keyboard player than I am, and I'm a better guitarist than he is. So it's helpful in a technical capacity as well.
Yeah.
The music that we write together is, I think it's its own thing, and it's slightly different to the music that we write individually.
Yeah, and that idea of collaboration, because obviously sort of a lot of this scoring work you do on your own. How does that change the process when you're working with someone else, and then how also does that then change the outcome?
Well, we generally kind of come together at the beginning of a project and write together, sketch out some ideas roughly, often perhaps on a Zoom like this, just playing in our own studios, or maybe I'll go down to London and stay in his studio for a bit and we'll get some rough ideas going. But then we'll go off and kind of beaver away on things ourselves and, bounce things back and forth. And once we are in a groove, I suppose, of how it's going, we'll split up the cues and sort of divide and conquer a bit, and then someone will be broadly more responsible for some cues and someone will do the others, and then you might add to those cues as you go through. And hopefully we like to try and make sure that no one really knows what cues he's done and what cues I've done, so it's, or at least it feels good if no one can tell. So it's
if they sound vastly different, then obviously
then we haven't done our job properly.
Yeah. And how does the sort of the overall score, do you feel that Renegade Nell feels and sounds different to the stuff that you've done on your own, or is it
definitely?
I mean, it definitely sounds like you've been involved, but how does it change, that creatively change the end product, do you think?
Well, I just think just the moves that you'd make, whether it's chords or melodic moves that you might make as on your own. Nick's always surprising me with different ways of different paths that he'd follow with that musical idea, that's exciting. And I think there's still a lot of our own sonic signatures in there. I think you might hear a little bit of a cue and go, oh, I think that's a Nick bit, or that's an Oli bit. But overall, I think you'd say this is its own thing. And it's, neither of us had really done any kind of action adventure stuff before, and so it was really fun, and it sort of leaned into our musical tastes and passions. So yeah, it was a great one to do.
Earlier you mentioned that finding that unique sonic signature. What would you say is the unique sonic signature for Renegade Nell?
There's a cue early on where the main character displays her supernatural powers, as it were, to fight, and you have a Bulgarian choir coming in, and it's almost like you think it's going to be one thing, but then this massive drum track and bass drops and it's synthy, and then you realise it's an anachronistic score, because you've, up until that point, the first 10 minutes, you think you're into a kind of straightforward sort of swashbuckling period score, but then we kind of drop these synths and massive drums, and it's something else. And I think that was the key moment on that job where we were like, that's really cool. That's the sound of this score. And so whenever she fights, that sound and that motif comes in.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Bulgarian choir as well. What are they singing in Bulgarian, or have you written the lyrics? And if so, what are they singing? Because something sounded like Hot Llama or something like that. But I always wonder, because I know Isabel Waller-Bridge, when she was doing stuff for Fleabag, at times she would give the choir like silly things to sing, which you can't really hear and nobody knows about, but if she knows what they're actually singing. I just wondered if you do the same.
We did. We wrote lyrics in English and then had them translated to Bulgarian.
Okay.
So we wrote things, I can't remember what we wrote now in English, but we wrote things like fight, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you, that kind of thing.
Where did you get your suit? At the toilet store?
Yeah, exactly. very sometimes stupid, sometimes serious lyrics, and it would be, they'd have to work sort of phonetically for what we wanted, and we worked with the choir master, and we recorded it all in Sophia to make sure that it made sense, wasn't insulting in any way or inappropriate, and made basic linguistic sense. That's how we did it.
You don't want to get cancelled in Bulgaria.
Exactly.
There's no coming back. Well, I'm a challenge accepted. I'm actually going to go through. I mean, there's a lot of cues, and I've been through a lot of them, but I'm going to go through and see if I can discern which one you wrote and which one Nick did. But yeah, well, I think that's probably a good time to go getting a taste. Getting a taste. I always think that we are massively shaped by the music that we consume when we're younger, probably, I don't know, from the age of 10 into our early 20s, and that goes a long way to informing our creativity. Are there any particular bands, albums, songs, artists that you can remember hearing for the first time and that being a really seminal moment?
I mean, I grew up in Britpop 90s. That's kind of my era. And so,
were you Blur or Oasis?
I mean, I was Blur, even though I grew up just south of Manchester. I always found Oasis slightly intimidating. But I think that whole scene informed a lot of my writing when I was started my own writing. I don't know whether you could really draw a link between that and, well, maybe you could draw a link that the kind of hooky catchiness of my writing style is probably embedded in that poppier thing. But I think my scoring sensibilities are more informed by the kind of the films that I watched when I was growing up, and obviously I just devoured John Hughes films and action films of the 80s and Back to the Future and all of that stuff.
Any other particular action films or John Hughes movies?
Well, anything from the 90s, all the John Williams stuff from Jurassic Park and all of that. I think that was all embedded in my psyche, and I suppose I never really, because I'm not classically trained, I never thought, oh, well, I'll be able to do that when I grow up. But I think it was when I watched Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and John Bryan's score for that, and I was like, hang on a minute, that sounds a bit different. That kind of sounds like the kind of stuff that I've been trying to do on the 4-track.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, so maybe music for films and TV doesn't have to be orchestral all the time, and doesn't have to be like, posh music. So yeah, that informed a lot, I think, of my scoring sensibility.
Yeah. And because obviously you were a trumpet player and drummer in what sounds like jazz bands, was there a lot of jazz featured in your youth?
So when I was growing up, yeah, I'd just a lot of swing bands. I suppose it doesn't really feature anymore. I listen to a lot less now. But yeah, I think my scores are often rhythmic. Well, like I tried to analyse this, and I feel like they're often rhythmically led rather than sometimes melodically led. And I think that's because I'm a drummer and I often think in grooves and patterns before I think in melody. And yeah, just from years of just having to keep playing jazz time over things.
You mentioned the action movies from the 80s, but so in the last couple of years, basically since COVID, I've started revisiting 80s action movies with a friend.
Oh, great.
And I think we've pretty much watched every action movie that was made in the 80s, but there's loads of incredible scores and loads of amazing cameos from people like Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton. So Eric Clapton plays the guitar on the Lethal Weapon
oh, really?
score. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
Herbie Hancock, and I can't remember now, probably almost verging sort of 70s, but certainly into the early 80s, he was involved with quite a lot of... and yeah, there's quite often these musicians that pop up and you sort of think, oh, wow, I had no idea back in the day watching it that these guys were playing on these scores, but they are.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So, yeah. And what about, you mentioned sort of the movies, John Hughes, and music of John Williams. Was there any particular TV that you remember growing up that shaped you musically?
I wouldn't say shaped me musically. I think in as much as TV shapes everyone musically, I wouldn't say. Yeah, I'm struggling to think of something off the top of my head that I could point to TV wise and go, oh, I loved that. I mean, I loved, because I watched a lot of comedy. The Fawlty Towers theme tune was always stuck in my head, and but I can't think of anything that was something that inspired me. Well, actually, that said, Green Wing was something that I really loved when I was a bit older as a student, I think. And, I was like, this is really exciting kind of scoring at the time.
Yeah. You mentioned Fawlty Towers. What was some of the other comedy that you grew up watching?
Red Dwarf. Red Dwarf, actually, yeah. Howard Goodall. Yeah. The theme tune for Red Dwarf is a classic. And
it's funny because when I asked that question about TV, I know in my mind I'm not thinking about comedy. The things that spring to mind for me are things like the A-Team and Knight Rider. They all had incredible theme tunes.
Yes.
And then the cartoons like Thundercats.
Yes.
The theme tune for that was amazing. And I always what was it? Quantum Leap.
Quantum Leap.
Sort of had this epic prog. It just goes everywhere and all over the place. And I just remember them in so synonymous with the programs. That,
yes. Well, I think like kids' TV often it casts a long shadow musically, like The Littlest Hobo. I love that. And things like Little House on the Prairie and Gentle Ben. I used to love westerns as a kid. There's loads. Yeah, the A-Team was great, and even just game shows and things like Crystal Maze stick with you.
Going for Gold,
obviously.
Which Hans Zimmer.
Yeah. Zimmer classic.
Absolute Zimmer classic. It seemed like a bit of a heyday for very catchy theme tunes, the 80s.
There's less of that these days. It's a shame.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've asked quite a few people why they think that is, and I think some people view it as because the TV was on in the background, the theme tune was an important part. It lasted quite a long time as an important part of getting people's attention to the appointment to view. And then other people have sort of said, well, certainly within the realm of television, and then within the realm of film, that things are maybe less melodically driven. I think it was Anita Desai thought that it was because directors don't want to commit emotionally to any one specific emotion, that they want to sort of leave it open. Whereas if she thought that maybe a hook or a particular melody would lead people in a particular direction. So yeah, it's funny how tastes and trends change over time.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, it's probably time to get into the deep, important part of the show, which is the Quickfire Questions. Obviously, that's not to say that everything we've talked about for the last 15 minutes isn't really important. Of course it is. But yeah, the most important question of all, Ollie, is what's your favourite biscuit?
Milk chocolate digestive.
A milk chocolate digestive?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's just solid. It's just, you know where you are with the milk chocolate digestive. It's never going to let you down. It's going to be dunkable if you want it to be dunkable.
And are you a dunker?
I am occasionally, yeah. And it's it's big. It's quite a big biscuit.
Robust.
Yeah. And widely available.
Yes, at every corner shop.
Crucially.
How do you feel about putting a bit of caramel into it, a digestive?
I don't feel bad about that. I feel good about that, yeah. I do also like hobnobs, milk chocolate hobnobs.
Yeah. Also very dunkable biscuit. What do you do to let off steam?
I've recently got into pickleball, which is quite fun. Yeah, it's like big ping pong on a tennis court.
Yeah.
And really, really into that. You can really hit the ball without it going miles off the court. And I'm a bad tennis player, so normally I'm hitting the ball far too far or in the wrong direction. But with this, you can kind of just thwack it, and it broadly goes in the right direction, and is really satisfying. So yeah, I recommend that.
I'm quite surprised because I only heard about pickleball probably in the last year, and I'm quite surprised that it's made it to Sheffield.
Yeah, well,
to Yorkshire. Normally we're laggards, and it takes ages to make its way up north. But
no, it's sweeping the nation. It's they've already painted the courts with the lines, and my girlfriend's parents have set up a pickleball team.
Wow!
So serious? Yeah, it's everywhere.
Have you played paddle?
No, but that's next on my list because they've just opened a new paddle centre in Sheffield as well that I'm keen to go to.
Yeah, that seems to be sweeping the nation, London, at the moment. But I think it's been massive in Spain and Iberia for a long time. What is a little known fact about Oli Julian?
That I was once an ice cream man.
Sorry, come again?
I was once an ice cream man for 6 months in Germany.
In Germany, no less.
Yeah, when I spent, after I finished school, I spent 6 months as an ice cream man on promenade down on Lake Constance selling ice cream.
Oh, in the Bodensee.
Yes, to tourists.
So that wasn't because you said you studied languages, so you didn't have a year abroad.
No, this was before I went to university. Yeah.
Oh right, wow. And is it an ice cream man? Because I lived in Germany for a year, but I can't. Does an ice cream man in Germany drive around in a van?
No. It's not. It was a little kiosk,
right?
Attached to a hotel. So, but I was just on the promenade, giving ice cream to Germans.
Wow, nice. It's lovely down there in the summer as well, isn't it?
It's very nice, yeah.
What scares you?
What scares me? I think not having well, do you mean in terms of my work or just generally in life?
Just generally in life. I mean, it could be work related, it could be not.
Loneliness, I think. I enjoy having my family around me. I enjoy friends. I think I always want to be busy and amongst people. I think I'm too much time on my own makes Ollie a dull boy.
Yeah, and I don't know. They said that I've heard said that loneliness is the malady of the 21st century because of technology. We kid ourselves into thinking that we are connecting with people by doing it online, but actually it's not the same as a real human interaction. And it speaks to what we were talking about off mic before we started about if you work from home on your own, because there's obviously around COVID, everybody starts working from home and everyone's like, hang on a minute, this is great, because I think when you do work at home on your own, you can be more productive than when you're in an office with lots of distractions. But then over time, there's this strange thing that happens whereby you have increasingly less human interaction. And it's very abstract. It's hard to sort of pinpoint what it is, but something doesn't feel right. And I imagine as a composer, you've probably experienced that as well, because you spend a lot of time in a soundproof room on your own, forget to eat, forget what time it is.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly it. I feel like spend most of my time in a. I don't even have any windows in this room. So in a dark room on my own, I crave human contact when I leave this room, and that's why I often come down to London and for events and things. I was down yesterday, and that hopefully mitigates the amount of time that I spend here on my own, because it's not the same speaking to people, as lovely as it is. It's not the same speaking to people on Zoom as it is in person, and I actually try and make sure that any opportunity work-wise, like a spotting session, I always make a point of going down and doing it in the edit suite with them rather than doing it over Zoom, because I just don't think you can read people's body language. I don't think you can just connect with them as well. When you're on Zoom, things are lost in translation. It's not good, and it's kind of this hangover from COVID that I feel like people have decided that it's okay that we just do all of this on Zoom, and I sort of don't really think that it is. I think there's I think humans need more connection than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Final question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
My advice to my younger self would be have piano lessons and be absolutely confident in your own sound and not feeling like you need to ape or copy anyone else, or not feel like just because you're not a classically trained musician or composer that you can't do this job, because it's patently not true, as many successful composers have now proven. So yeah, that's what I would tell myself. It's taken a long time for me to have the confidence to realise that, I think, as a writer. But I still think learning the piano is one of the best gifts that you could give to a child. It's so useful. Yeah.
It's very interesting, the sort of having that confidence in your own sound and ability, because this is, I think, the fourth interview in a row where this has come up. Andrew Lockington talked about it, Jeff Russo talked about it, Nathan Klein talked about it, and now you've mentioned it. Is there a point in your career where you feel like that was the moment where because Nathan said something interesting, that he said that with a lot of pitches he found himself trying to second guess what producers wanted, whereas in actual fact they quite often don't know what they want, so trying to second guess it is a fruitless task. So the thing to do is just do something that's true to you, that excites you, and hopefully if it's right and it excites them, then they'll pick up on that. Is there a moment when you feel like you've shifted from that kind of not having the confidence, not believing, to a point where, like, actually no, I completely know what my own sound is now, and I buy into it?
There hasn't been a moment where I've realised that. I think I've gradually come to accept it over time that I do have a sound of some sort. I think the thing is that because I started off in adverts and every day I was writing something in a different genre or a different style with different instruments, I've never in my own head can say that, what's that? Is that me? Is that what I am? And I think, but people I've spoken to have said, oh yeah, even though that's like ska music, you can kind of still tell it's you, or that's like solo violin, you can kind of still tell it's you. So like I'm sort of come to trust that other people know, you have said that is the case, and if I don't see it, that's fine. And that yeah, to your point, like working with clients, just trusting that whatever you do in whatever style with whatever instruments, it will sound like you, and that's what they'll appreciate, because that's why they've hired you, or that's why you're in the mix for a job. So yeah, I've sort of come to at peace with the fact that I can't really tell you what my sound is, but other people sort of can. And at the end of the day, as long as you keep writing, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, be prolific.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. One great sentiment to end on. Obviously, all of your music is available on streaming platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music and everywhere in between. Do you use social? Where can people find you on social?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter anymore, obviously, and yeah, don't ever check Facebook. But yeah, so Instagram's the way to go, or on my website.
And your website, yeah, both of which I will link to in the show notes. But Ollie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time to chat.
Thank you.
And what's next? What are you working on at the moment?
I'm just starting on a new drama, which is I can't really say that much about yet, but it's quite exciting. Yeah, a TV series.
Look forward to hearing it. Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, and given that you've listened this far, I feel you might have, then I would be honoured and incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to subscribe, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. By subscribing, you'll automatically be notified each time a new episode drops, and by rating the show, you tell the artificial intelligence that will soon be running the world that this podcast is worth listening to. I certainly get a lot of insights and value from these conversations, and I genuinely hope you do too. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, then you can email me, podcast@larpmusic.com. Larpmusic.com is my digital abode, and the home of the podcast is larpmusic.com/Sync Music Matters Podcast. And Sync Music Matters Podcast is hyphenated. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.